Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. Today from Education Elements, we're going to talk about surveys, and I'm going to give you all some tips from an interesting point of view. We're going to talk about mistakes to avoid when implementing a school survey. We're going to talk about our company, Education Elements, but give you all some ideas, some things to think about when you're implementing a school survey or a district survey, wherever you're joining us from. So we're going to go ahead and get started now. So K-12 and our Education Elements, we are a national K-12 consulting company. We provide lots of different services around these kind of four main areas: instructional design and implementation, organizational strategy, and then leadership strategy. And then what we're going to talk about today is how we work with school districts in data collection and surveys and help you apply some of the lessons that we've learned in this work so that you can bring them back to where you work. We've been around since 2010. You can see and get an idea of where we've worked. There's probably lots more blue dots that need to go on this map, but we've had a large range of impact across the country, and that allows us to bring this collective knowledge from our experts who are former educators and these experiences we've had in school districts that look like all different shapes and sizes. That's me. I'm Corey. I'm our facilitator today. A little bit of information about me. I'm a parent. I'm a husband to a teacher. So I have a first grader and then I got one on the way. First and foremost, I think the parents who are here and who work in public education, that's the hat that we often wear first. So I'm a proud parent who gets to walk and pick up my son from school every day. So it's just great to have schools. I'm a partner at Education Elements. So I get to work with districts here in Texas. I'm located here in Austin, Texas. Work with districts, work with TEA, work with regional service centers, lots of different clients and different problems that we work to address. My former background is I was a chief communications officer in large suburban districts in Texas. So most recently Round Rock and Leander ISDs here in the Austin area. I also spent some time in the Rio Grande Valley working in schools in communications and community relations roles. So as part of my job, I was in charge of surveys a lot of times. So that's where I am a person who doesn't come to you to provide some knowledge on surveys as a content area expert. I don't have a master's degree or an advanced degree in research and evaluation. The good thing about our company is that we have those people who work behind the scenes on our tripod team. What I'm here to do, and I call myself an expert beginner when it comes to surveys, because I've seen a lot, been a part of a lot, and I think what the knowledge that I'll be able to bring y'all is things that you'll be able to apply and to consider in your survey work. Our agenda today is we're going to do a brief check-in. We're going to talk around the concept of psychological safety. You came to a session called mistakes. These are 7 mistakes to avoid when implementing a school survey. So just the vulnerability of being able to talk about when things don't work and how what value that brings to organizations and to teams. And then we're going to go dive right into it. We're going to talk about the 7 mistakes that you should avoid. I'm going to tell some stories, give you some examples, and give you some things to think about. And then we're going to wrap up and close out our learning today. So here's our check-in. I want you to think for 2 minutes, type it in the chat. I want you to think about a time where you saw or experienced an incident that caused a team to mistrust each other or an individual on the team. Don't name names. I just want you to think about it, make a list, and share in the chat. We're going to do this for about, let's think and reflect for about 5 minutes. So I want y'all to think about a time that you saw or experienced an incident where it caused mistrust on a team, whether that was a project team, a school leadership team, a teacher team, wherever you saw that. It could have been in a voluntary capacity, but think about that and make sure you drop it in the chat. So I'm just going to read a couple of these. Predecessors in my department that manipulated data to tell a specific narrative, caused distrust in the new data team. You can win the press conference, you can win the presentation, but overall, if things aren't going well, you can only get past just like any sort of fairy tale or story when it comes to lies or mistrust. Just general lack of transparency, talking about roles and team members going above supervisors instead of dealing with the teammate. just not engaging in meetings, shut down a proposal I presented. So that goes with an example that I used, and while anybody else who's still filling out, I was on a team where we had a leader who he liked to make the decisions in isolation. And what ended up happening was, he didn't sit back and when we had team meetings and let others discuss the agenda items. When he saw his role as a meeting facilitator, he saw that as being an active and direct and really the participant in it. So he would raise agenda items, weigh in right off the bat, and then wouldn't prompt anybody to add to it. So what it did was, even beyond those agenda items, just created this area where no one felt safe to make decisions without him. And it really staggered progress because we really couldn't move or make any changes because everything flowed through this one person who didn't seem to want to hear anything. Negative comments on a survey that took others by surprise. So just having that general sense of like, do I feel safe in the feedback that I get? And that's definitely something that you see when it comes to surveys. And one of my team members was friends with district admin and went back and shared team only info. So just that trust and confidentiality is what Lydia shared. So thank you all for sharing. And I hope you all think about that again, as we go through this presentation. We're going to talk about this concept of psychological safety. So Amy Edmondson is this Harvard professor who has dedicated her life, 30 years of research on this concept of teams making it safe to talk about failure, to collaborate. She's done research in the medical field around teams and surgical teams and how they talk about failure. She's done studies around pharmaceuticals and when do diverse teams work and when don't they work. And she's found some key concept areas around this. And the definition that she gives for psychological safety is that it is a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. And one of these core concepts that she came up with in this work is reflected in a project that she did with Google, was who is on the team matters less than how the team members interact, structure their work, and view the contributions. So the idea is that oftentimes when we're putting project teams together, it's really easy to focus on getting the right people in the room. And while that's important, a lot of what she found was more important is how the team actually works. At the core was that psychological safety. Do team members feel safe to take risks, to make decisions? I was working with a school district that was caught on the idea of empowerment and like, what did empowerment mean? We wanted to empower teachers in our classrooms. We wanted to empower principals in their schools. We wanted to empower directors in their roles to be able to do what was best for kids and for students and for our community, without having to navigate the kind of bureaucracy that naturally happens in especially in large organizations like schools and school districts. And the word empowerment even caused in this leadership team some great strife, because there was also a lot of fear around, does empowerment mean everyone's going to be doing their own thing? We talk about aligning instructional practices and aligning instructional materials. If we give too much empowerment, does that create this wild west where everyone's doing their own thing and we don't have that consistency, that quality control, that we can provide a quality service to our students and to our families? And for me, when it comes to the term empowerment is when it aligns with psychological safety. Empowerment is when I, the person on the team, can understand the structures, the expectation, what I need to do to be successful, and can do that by myself in support of the team. So I know how to get the things that I need, and I'm empowered to go and make the change that I know are right for the group. So the other elements here of teams matter, of teamwork and how people work: dependability, structure, clarity, meaning, and then people understanding the impact of their work. So if you want to change culture, we have to start with teams. So when we talk about culture within a school district or within an organization, focusing on how teams operate and work. Are teams being effective? Are they managing their time well? Are they accomplishing their tasks? Do people understand their value? Do they know what success looks like? If we want to change the culture of an organization, looking at teams is the way to do it. And if we want to change the way teams, we need to start with habits. And that's where psychological safety fits in. So Amy Edmondson, in her article, The Competitive Imperative of Learning, created this hierarchy of accountability and psychological safety, or this matrix that shows you like where is it most effective for learning organizations. So when psychological safety is low and accountability is low is where we get apathy. People they don't feel safe to make change, and they don't know what they're accountable to. So they get apathetic, they don't participate. When accountability is high, but they don't feel safe. So I have this very structured, so you talk about like high stakes testing in states. Like the accountability is high. Like I know that my students need to perform on this standardized test, but maybe there's no psychological safety for me to be able to feel comfortable talking about failure, making change, to make adjustments in my classroom or in my school to meet this high accountability. And that's where we start to feel a lesser degree we start to feel anxiety. High psychological safety, when I can feel comfortable talking about things on how they operate on my team. I feel comfortable talking to my supervisor who's leading this team meeting and telling him why I don't think he's right in this decision, or what he needs to consider when implementing. So I'll tell the story of I was in charge of surveys in a former district, and one of the things that I was big on and is a best practice when it comes to surveys is making sure you share the information after the survey. If people tell you something, you have to tell them like, hey, this is what we heard and this is what we're going to do about it. This was a big shift for a particular leader that I was working with, because in his mind, the way that it worked was that we were the administrators, the owners of a product. We would get the feedback, we would make the change. And as long as we were doing what was right for kids, people would see the work, they would be accepting. But we've seen this big shift, I think, in organizations and structures like school districts, where volunteers, school board members, they want to be involved in the change. Everyone wants to know and have a part of, or maybe not everyone, but a significant amount of people want to be involved in school transformation, school change, and be a part of the action. So being able to say, hey, we asked you these questions, this is what we saw and heard, and then we made these changes, was really important to me, because I thought that that was the way that we needed to make and advance that change. So if I felt safe to say that, but there was no accountability to be able to impact that change, or there was no accountability where someone was expecting that from us, that was a standard, there might be some comfort. And ultimately, where you wanted to be in that learning zone is here, where psychological safety was high and accountability is high. I am expected to do this. I know it's expected of me, and I feel safe to be able to talk to my teammates, my supervisor, of these are the things that I need to be able to do that. So how can we build psychological safety? No one wants to look ignorant. So what they do is they stop asking questions. So you have to encourage in your organization, like, how do we ask questions on your team? No one wants to look incompetent. So as a leader on a project team, creating the habit of admitting weaknesses or talking about mistakes is a way for people to feel comfortable in that, talking about failure. No one wants to look intrusive, so you avoid this by not offering any ideas. So if you're sitting back and oftentimes I've been in meetings, and I'm sure you have too, where someone gives this very lengthy, detailed presentation and just says, hey, now what do you think? Taking the step to guide and ask specific questions so people feel comfortable being able to intrude on the space that you've occupied to get that high quality feedback is a good strategy to be able to make people feel safe. No one wants to look negative. They don't want to challenge the status quo. So being able to create this space where people understand that if you're giving feedback, you're not challenging the status quo, you're not taking things personally. So psychological safety is strong when individuals and teams trust that they will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. So leaders, again, model this by normalizing asking questions, admitting weaknesses, offering ideas, and challenging the status quo. How can we think about this in a different way, in making the work a learning problem? So, take the person out of it, think about talking about it as a system, talking about it as a learning problem. So we've never been here before. We can't know what will happen. We've got to have everyone's brain and voices in this game. Acknowledge your own fallibility. I'm coming into this presentation about surveys telling you I'm not a PhD in research and evaluation. My sister is one of those. I've worked with a lot of super smart people who do program evaluation and research and have PhDs and write research papers on that. That's not me. I'm not coming to you from that lens. I'm coming to you from somebody who's had to work with people who do that and be able to administer and sell and execute a survey to large, complex communities in Texas. And I'm coming to you as somebody who's had to create my own surveys and things that I've seen districts mess up. I get to work with districts all over the state and nation. So hoping that you can learn from some of the mistakes to implement surveys. I don't think anyone would be coming to a webinar like this who's got a PhD or that. So I'm hoping that in my fallibility of not being a data scientist, that I can provide you with some specific ideas and questions and things to look with. Model curiosity. So you can build psychological safety by just being a generally curious person on your team and framing it as, I just want to know more about this, getting people to think and to expand their knowledge. All right, so talked about psychological safety, the thing that maybe you did not sign up for being in this survey, being in this webinar, but I wanted to provide some context before we just jump right into mistakes about why talking about mistakes are important in providing strength and learning in your organization or on your team. So without further ado, the 7 mistakes to avoid in your survey. Don't leave families in the dark regarding student surveys. Don't push families if they don't want their students or students surveyed. Don't let your survey results fall into the trash. Don't be scared if you can't take the same action from your survey responses. Don't keep the survey results a secret. Don't make a distribution plan that doesn't work for your intended audience. And don't distribute a new survey without testing it. We're going to go into each one of these, and I'm going to tell some stories and some examples. I will, for the sake of the people involved in these retellings, their names will be changed. There was like a old cop show, right? Or what was it? There was like a murder mystery show. One of those old timey television shows. Like we have changed the identities of the people to protect the innocent. We will not be naming names in this presentation. Don't leave families in the dark regarding a student survey. So this is probably even too close, Dragnet. Thank you, Anne. So this is probably even too close to a lot of people in this room, especially if you're working in public schools right now. But things are contentious in a lot of states, in a lot of communities, about what's being taught in school, what's being asked of students. I worked with a district once upon a time who was trying to implement a student mental health survey. They were trying to collect information about students, their mental health. There were questions about substance abuse. The idea was, and these were high school juniors and seniors, the idea was they were trying to identify needs and services and supports. It was a national or a regional survey that they implemented, and they gave it to students, and there were some questions that parents didn't really like. They didn't want their students sharing information about their sex life. They didn't want their high school students talking about, even in a confidential survey. And this great idea of like, hey, how can we provide students with the services they need? Concept behind it was completely ruined because the survey just showed up one day without any context. I suggest when you're putting a survey out, make sure you think about your entire community. And if there's even a sparkle of controversy in it, do everything you can to make the survey information readily available. If parents want to see the survey, post it on your website, print out copies and put them at your school. Make sure you let parents know, hey, we're administering the survey, and make sure that you communicate in multiple different ways. If you just rely on, hey, we told you about the survey in the email that we sent out once last week, that's not enough for a lot of people in this day and age when it comes to information overload. So making sure that families have access to what your survey is, why are you doing this survey, what is your intent and what you want to do with it, and give them information and access to it. Don't push families if they don't want their students surveyed. In that same vein, if you do a good job and you say, hey, we're doing this survey, even in the most innocent of survey examples, especially when it comes to students, Student voice is so important. In fact, we have an entire survey product at Elements called the 7C survey that is based all around the value of student voice in their educational experience and how that transfers to student outcomes. And that when students weigh in on the experience that they have in their classrooms, they have this amazing perception of value in things that come to successful learning and teaching and instruction in our classrooms. But if a family is not comfortable with the language you're using in your survey, it creates this, it has the potential to create this controversy around it. And there's this whole, especially here in Texas and suburban areas, there's this whole family choice, parental choice, and parental voice in their child's education, even in the most sincere and nice and seemingly uncontroversial ways. So although we all want, especially when we do student surveys, to have high participation windows, don't ever feel like you need to put this survey out and push everyone to complete it. Give families an opportunity to have an opt-out. Hey, we're doing this survey. This is what we're trying to accomplish. This is when it'll be administered. If you want to see the questions beforehand, you can click here, or you can come by our office. And if you want to opt out, send an email to Miss So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so, and we'll make sure that we don't include your student in this. At the end of the day, most people, when they have the information, they're going to feel that psychological safety we talked about. They're probably not going to opt out. What ends up happening is if they don't know about it and they hear something, they'll get some context, or they'll get a little bit of they'll get no context, or they'll get some context that's the wrong context, and they'll create their own story without the lack of information. With no available information, people will fill their own void. So just don't ruin your survey or have that potential, even if it's the slimmest of chances. Number 3, don't let your survey results fall into the trash. So I kind of gave my example of a school district I was working with where we had a survey that we did. It was a school quality survey, and we executed the survey, and oftentimes for a few of those years that we did it, we didn't do anything with the data. Like, it was sparsely used. Some schools would use it in terms of their campus improvement planning, some would not. And we wouldn't communicate what we heard or what we saw or what we were doing with it. So parents didn't know anything about it. So they'd get survey fatigue. They would get survey after survey, but they wouldn't know what was going to happen with it. And I think what happens with a lot of working with a lot of survey companies is there's a lot of survey companies out there that are platforms where that they'll put a survey together and they'll help you distribute it, or you can get on Google and you'll create your survey and you'll put it out. But what's really hard is making it actionable once you get that data. So for example, when we worked with the district around school reopening during COVID pandemic, they had teachers really struggling in terms of workload and feeling safe in their schools with COVID. So this was right after schools were reopened in 2020 in the fall here in Texas, and trying to figure out, like, how do we feel safe coming in? How do we manage our workload? We had a lot of teachers. They had a lot of teachers working remotely and in person simultaneously. Did a survey, got a lot of like, hey, this isn't going real well type of feedback, but we didn't get anything that was really actionable. So what we did was we sat down with the district, we looked through their data and helped come up with these different buckets of ideas. Like, these are the themes that we're hearing. And then once we identified the themes, we did another layer of engagement where we brought teacher groups together. And in those teacher groups, we started to talk about the buckets and get action items. Like, how do we make this idea around actionable? So when it came to COVID, like, one of the big ideas was like, hey, I have these kids who are at home learning from their home and doing everything remote, and I have these kids in person. But I'm having to do all this extra work because I'm having to communicate and spend all this time virtually while I'm also having kids in front of me. So like, identify this problem about teacher workload. Like, how are they managing all of this external digital communication they're not used to? Because when they communicate with kids in a normal time, they're coming into their classroom, you're writing it on your chalkboard, and that's how they're getting the information about assignments. That's being turned into like uploading more information onto their website and or emailing and chasing down assignments. So we were like, okay, how can we take care of this time issue? Like, there's clearly not enough time in the day. But we don't know how to make this actionable. So in the focus groups, one of the ideas was we started to think about like, hey, what are some ideas or some things that we could do to make it actionable. We brought teachers in as part of the process. So we made the data actionable by continuing the discussion and bringing people in to solve the problem. I think another challenge is that when people get their survey results, there are things that they hear that they can't do, whether that's a legal reason that I cannot do this legally, or a money reason, or I cannot do this financially, or I don't have this person, or I don't have these resources. So they don't respond to what they heard. So it's like, hey, we'd really like some after school programs at our school, but the school's like, well, I can't offer after school programs because I don't have the staff that wants to do this or can do this. So therefore, like, they don't do anything. They'll ignore, and that's what makes it easy to just let the survey results fall in the trash. And the best practice would be that even if there's something that's being asked that you cannot do, make sure that you still just tell people, hey, I heard you, and this is what we did. And that's what this next one. Don't be scared if you can't take the same action from your survey responses. So if your survey responses say, hey, we want an after school program, we want the music teacher to do a musical once a semester with our elementary school kids, but you can't do that for whatever reason. Don't be scared, like, to think I'm going to get this feedback and I know there's nothing I can do, therefore I'm just not going to ask, or I'm not going to share the results of this survey. What you need to do is, most people are reasonable and they'll ascertain and be able to understand, I heard you, empathize. I mean, that's a big thing that you can tell somebody. I heard you say this. I want to tell you that this is the situation that we're in. We don't have funding for this. The state doesn't fund this program. Give them a rationale. Maybe even try to find a way to meet them in the middle. Like, hey, I can't provide you after school programs every day, but maybe if you helped me recruit some parent volunteers, we could have a 1 day a week after school enrichment program where where volunteers came in and led some area of expertise. So being able to have that safety and understanding, like, I'm going to hear stuff in the survey that I can't do, but that doesn't mean I'm going to ignore it and throw it in the trash. And don't keep the survey results a secret. A best example, and this is a concept that our founder at Education Elements, Anthony Kim, wrote about in his book, The New School Rules, is the 3x3. So when it comes to communicating results, it's thinking about, how can I share 3 different messages in 3 different platforms about this? There's like this level of engagement that people have. There are a lot of people who are too busy. And when it comes to a survey, they're only going to want some high level talking points feedback. Like, in this survey, we heard that parents are concerned about traffic. There's concern traffic around our schools and school dismissal times. They're concerned about bus routes and buses are taking too long, and they're concerned about overcrowded schools. 3 high level elements. You're going to have some parents who are going to want a high level of information. So making the survey results available on your website as in like a close to raw form, so people can see all of the results. Maybe a longer summary of the results where you're breaking down those 3 big bullet points, and you're writing, 3 or 4 sentences that you post on your website underneath those bullet points that kind of explain a little bit. Anytime that you can show the action that you took out of your survey, like, hey, these are the results of our survey. And then the next level is saying, like, as a result of these things that we heard in our survey, we're doing A, B, C, D, E. And being able to connect that to the feedback. Another thing that really can negatively impact a survey is to not make a distribution plan that works for your intended audience. So one of the first things you have to think about when you sit back and create a survey is, who am I trying to reach with the survey? What am I intending to get? What's the information I need? Ideally you're thinking, like, what is the outcome that I want to be? Like, what do I want my department, my school, my district to look like as a result of this? Back that up. What are the questions I need to have answered to be able to do that? And back it up. Who are the people that I need to ask those questions to? So when you start to think about those people, like, how do I reach those people? What is the distribution plan that works for that intended audience? If it's students, we have a lot of success in our program, especially around the 7C surveys. We distribute the 7C survey in our schools during class time. We know class time and instructional time is precious. We also know that getting student voice and understanding in their learning is incredibly valuable. And you can get close to 100% participation rate when you take the time and you're meaningful in a class period, whether that's like every time your elementary school students rotate to library during a week and the librarian's going to distribute the survey, or maybe all of your social studies classes one given week in a middle school. Find a period that works and take the time for students to take the survey during the day, and make sure it's something that students can do. So we do this at Education Elements, and survey companies that I've worked with sometimes do this well. And you can do this well in creating your own survey and designing the questions, because we're talking about distribution, but also in writing the questions, differentiating, writing the question in a different way. And you know, you want to collect the same kind of data that you collect for a K-2 student. Like, you still want to know some of the same components of what their learning looks like as you would with a high school student, but making sure you phrase that question where it makes sense to the K-2 student versus the high school student. But the distribution plan, so with students, you know, we find a lot of success in finding those times during the school day and investing in that school time to hear from our students and value student voice. With parents, you just have to know your parent communities. Do they respond really well in email? One thing that's really effective of our strategy would be like sending things to parents in multiple ways. Like, I'm going to hit them up with an email, but I'm also going to give it to them in the parent night. Parents are also more likely to read an email from their teacher. So asking your teachers, like, hey, can you also send this link to this survey out? That way that they're seeing it from my principal email, from the school email, from the district email. Putting it on social media, the way that you distribute makes a big impact in terms of what kind of response rate that you get. And thinking about how easy you can make it. We were doing an employee survey with a district where we were really struggling to get voice from custodians and hourly workers. We had distributed the survey through email, and although every employee in the district had an email, a lot of employees they don't get work tasks in their email. So they have an account, but they're not necessarily going and checking their email. So we'd go to a staff meeting and say, hey, during the staff meeting, let's take this survey real quick. We actually use text messaging to be able to reach them, because, and in fact, we got a 70% response rate on a custodial survey of custodians when we sent them a text message and allowed them, and they didn't need to use a smartphone, although they could have. We didn't ask them to click a link and to go to a website off of their smartphone. We wanted them just to be able to text back their answers. So we modified the survey so that it could be distributed through text message, and that they could just respond and reply back. We knew the audience was also very, 50-50 Spanish speaking to English speaking. So we had Spanish questions in Spanish. We got responses in Spanish. We had a translation process. So we knew that like the distribution mattered of that, because if we just relied on email, we weren't going to reach the people that we wanted. So being able to think about the distribution plan for your audience. Don't send an email survey to people who don't check their email. Don't send only an email survey to parents who just don't read their district or their school email. Make sure that you layer all of those things in. And last but not least, the last thing that can make your survey go wrong, don't distribute a new survey without testing it. I have seen and experienced lots of surveys where, so there's a concept called the curse of knowledge. So what's in your brain makes sense to you, but what's really hard is to get what's in your brain and make sense to somebody else. And I'm guessing this is mostly a room of educators, either in your current capacity or in a former capacity where you worked as a teacher, and you understand like, hey, I have to teach and share this knowledge so that the person I'm talking to masters it. And that same thing does apply to all communication that happens within the school district. And so like you could write the best question and it makes sense to you, and then somebody will get it and be like, I don't know what this question meant. And they either won't respond, they'll turn the survey off, they'll tell people not to take the survey because, hey, it'll make your survey not look good. So what I recommend is, once you've thought about who that target audience is, make sure you have somebody who's in that target audience take your survey as a test before you send it out to 100 or 1,000 people. Thinking about this not only in a question design, like, hey, I'm going to have a third grader take this survey. Can a third grader read and understand this question? I don't know. Let's test it with Mrs. Johnson's third grade class, or a couple students in Mrs. Johnson's third grade class before we send it out. It's not just question design though, it's also with technology. So like especially when if you're using your own platform or something else. Is it mobile friendly? Does it work on all smartphones? What does it look like when you get it in an email? What does it look like in this web browser versus that web browser? Having people test it out is really important, because if it don't work, they're not going to share, and it can create this negative experience. Well, I appreciate y'all joining me on this journey in this fast and furious talking about psychological safety, mistakes, surveys, and more. At Elements, we have lots of great additional resources around surveys. Here's another resource that you can check out, and this is specific to student and teacher surveys. There's also some webinars and articles and things. If you want some 15 tips on things to do in a survey, I did that webinar last month, and there's also an accompanying article in there as well, with other information about surveys. You can subscribe to our blog for updates and things from Ed Elements and free resources that we offer. And this is a part of our Engage and Motivate webinar series. So if you want to check out, let's see what's coming up next. October 11th for teacher retention. So we're doing a lot of work with school districts around teacher retention. So if you want to learn some of the strategies that we're looking around teacher retention, please check us out on October 11th. October 20th, from thought to action. So strategies to bring your strategic plan, your strat plan to life. October 25th, the best 7 survey tools, what to consider when making your selection. You want to hear me talk about surveys again? I will be back to talk about specifically survey tools that are out there and to compare and contrast. So that way, if you're in the market for buying or evaluating survey tools, I'll help tell you what's out there and give you some insight. And then November 1st, why districts continue to make the shift to personalized learning. So to learn about the work that we do in creating and developing instructional models with schools and districts around individualized instruction, personalized learning. Anyway, want to thank y'all for joining us, and we will see you later.